A brown car guy. Brown car guy.
Hi guys, so today is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Just 3 days away, we are having elections. Well, there's elections actually all over the country, but particularly here in London where I am, we have the mayoral elections. And I can't begin to stress enough how important I think these elections are from the point of view of the car owner, the motorists, the car industry, and the car community at large. I think, this is nothing short of a referendum on our freedoms to own and drive and enjoy our cars, not just in London, but this will have inevitably a ripple effect across the country. Why do I think these things, and why am I putting up this content, despite the fact this is an automotive channel and I'm talking about elections? But I think that it's important from a car guy's point of view. There's an aspect of what's happening that needs to be transmitted out there, that needs to be comprehended and needs to be analyzed and potentially needs to be acted on. I'll explain right after this.
A brown car guy. Brown car guy.
Honestly, it's been preying on my mind a lot, and I can't stop thinking about what might or might not happen come Thursday here in London, because on the face of it, it's just another election. We have them all the time. It's just another leadership contest. We have those all the time. Come to think of it, leaders, we have those all the time. They keep changing. Just today, the one in Scotland resigned, so they'll have another one there soon. So you think, well, what's the big deal? It's just another one. It's politics. It's always the same thing. And the reality is, you're right. Even when you look at the candidates that are standing for the mayoral election here in London at the moment, they're all much of a muchness. To be honest with you, they're all more or less the same thing, really, aren't they? I mean, none of them, I would say, would appeal to me overall. None of them could I promise you. In fact, this is why I would never tell anybody who to vote for or how they should vote or what they should consider voting for, because I couldn't guarantee you or promise you that any of them will make things any better or that anything will change for the better. That's not what this is about. The reality is that, yes, there'll either be the same mayor or there'll be another mayor, and to be honest, most things will continue as they are. I don't see the crime rate will dramatically drop. Maybe I'm being pessimistic. I don't see that housing will suddenly improve. I don't think that business will suddenly rocket in London, no matter who takes the job. But that's just part of elections. That's just part of politics. That's part of how it is. But why I think this particular election is important, and why I refer to it in the intro as a referendum on motoring and car ownership, is because that's where I think the key messaging has to be in terms of what this election is about. And I know that a lot of people out there are like, oh, this is a minor issue, housing and crime and cost of living, these are all major issues, and they are, absolutely they are. But like I said, I don't feel there's going to be much of a difference no matter who you choose. I don't think any of those things are vastly going to be improved or actually even get any worse, because it's pretty bad as it is. One can hope, fingers crossed. New mayors make promises, and sometimes you need somebody new to come in and maybe, see solutions and see answers where somebody else has been blinkered because they've been there too long and they were too complacent, or they've been focused on other things, which I think is maybe the case here a little bit, But anyway, like I said, I've been very troubled about this whole thing. I've been just going over and over in my head. I'm really quite disturbed by it all, about what might actually happen, what that might mean for us, for car people, for car guys, for car owners, for motoring enthusiasts, for motoring journalists and content creators like me. Genuinely, I mean, yesterday I wrote that. Now I don't know if you can see it, but I wrote, an article, you'll see it on the screen, for, it's called, it's Khan or Your Car. You choose, you decide. And I think that the image that I've used there is pretty stark and gives you an indication of what I'm trying to say. I would advise you, or I'd recommend, or I'd urge that if you get a chance, go and give it a read. I mean, there are other things also on my page on browncarguy.com. For example, if you're like, what's the big deal with ULEZ? What's it all about? Especially if you're not a Londoner, or if you don't think you're affected by it, you're not sure what it all means, or why there should be anything wrong with it, or etc. etc. I have a full dossier on ULEZ on my channel. If you go on Brown Car Guy, and on my YouTube channel, there's a playlist there. But if you go on browncarguy.com, in the beginning there's an entire fact file which is text, and that really breaks everything down and explains everything. And just to reiterate, this is not about ULEZ in central London or ULEZ to north and south circulars. I know some people out there are upset that I don't argue against those ULEZ zones, but I'm a Londoner. I know how bad it is. I know how congested it is. And they claim there's 46% improvement because of ULEZ. The air has improved in central London. Maybe they fiddled in those numbers, maybe they haven't, maybe it's true. But I can accept that there will be an improvement because it's logical. It's just purely logical, just because of how densely packed that area is, how congested it is. Here I am walking around in outer London. That's a whole different thing. And this is where all the problem is. I don't want to get too much into that, because that whole argument is in that dossier and in countless other videos that I've done where I've explained why the expansion was unjustified. But this is not now about the expansion. Yes, of course, there are candidates that are saying that, if they get in, they will either do away with ULEZ or they will reverse the expansion, and happy days, that would be great, especially for me, because that means I can drive my car again without having to pay £12.50 every day. That's my classic E30 1989 BMW, which is not old enough to qualify as a historical classic, and so therefore has to pay the £12.50. So, like I was saying, it's not just about ULEZ though, because, as I said, I think there's much more to this, because project forward and think about what this could mean. First of all, think about what is the message that you send to the incumbent mayor if you return him for an unprecedented third term. This is the mayor that has introduced these draconian restrictions against cars and automotive. He introduced ULEZ, as you know, but on top of ULEZ, and also don't forget that people say, oh, Boris Johnson introduced it. No, Boris Johnson came up with the idea. And then he rushed it forward, and Sadiq Khan rushed it forward and introduced it, then expanded it again to the north and south circulars, and then expanded it again last year to cover the whole of London, turning it into the biggest low emission zone in the world at 600 square miles. Despite consultation figures, 60% said, 6% of outer Londoners said no, they didn't want it. 80% of businesses outer London said they didn't want it. He did it anyway. The argument being that it was for public health, air, toxic air pollution, etc., etc. But again, the figures don't substantiate that. I've done other videos, other content is there to prove those, and also they have their own report which they commissioned before they done any of this, that also said that there would be negligible to no impact in air quality, and that there would be detrimental impact in terms of socioeconomic status of those communities living in outer London. Because 60% of people living in outer London rely on their cars. But again, let's try to move on from ULEZ. I keep dwelling on ULEZ, but let's try and move on from that. Ultra low emission zones, let's move on from that. Like I said, this is more than that. This is about the war on motorists, because if he comes in again, and I know he said that he will not introduce paper mile, road charging, road user charging. This is the next thing that everybody's anticipating. Even in my book, the ULEZ Files, is a book of fiction, but in that I predicted it's actually set in the future, begins in 2026. When the journalist receives a report that yes, paper mile has been announced for central London, for London as a whole, I should say, not central London, for London as a whole, and then the action begins. He's currently, the current mayor, saying no, that will never happen, I will never do it. But of course, there's the same guy who said after he was re-elected last time that he would not expand ULEZ any further, and he did do. So it's hard to trust somebody. Hey, are you enjoying this video? Then make sure you hit the like button. It's very important. Plus, comment, share, and make sure you're subscribing. So the problem is that that's part of the war on motorists. And then you look at the fact that London, they're doing away with parking, they're making parking more expensive, they're graduating parking prices based on your car's emissions. I mean, we've discussed this before in another video, but when your car is parked and it's standing still, it's not polluting. So why are you paying more for your parking? It's taking up the same space as anybody else. So why are you paying more for parking? You're not even driving anywhere. It's ridiculous. But anyway, there are measures like that that come into place. Already we have big issues with cost of living, with cars, in terms of insurance prices are going up, fuel prices have gone up, maintenance prices are going up. Insurance prices, honestly, they're making it prohibitive for many people to even own cars anymore. It's just ridiculous. Gone up by over 50, 60, 70% in some cases. Mine went up this year. Fortunately, being a classic, not as much as that because of a limited mileage policy, and I'm hardly using it. I mean, I'm using it now maybe 3-4 times a month, whereas before it was 3-4 times a week, at least. But the point is that, as I said, if he comes back, if the public return him back into this position, then it's inevitable that he will see that as a validation, a vindication of everything that he's done in terms of impacting cars and the motorists. You know, and he will go, okay, well, that means that people have approved of what I've done, they accept what I've done, and they actually like what I've done because they re-elected me. When you see that that happens, then that emboldens that person to go, right, well, let me step it up then. Let me go to the next level. So despite what he said, an expansion of ULEZ could be possible, home counties and beyond, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Making ULEZ stricter could be on the cards. Euro 7 emissions will be introduced in 2025. Whatever they go, okay, right, forget Euro 4, forget Euro 6, it's now going to be Euro 7. And I can tell you they're really harsh. I mean, I've done, again, another video on that, is on my channel, on Euro 7, what it means, what it's about, and the incredible level of harsher restrictions in terms of emissions, not just from the exhaust pipe, tailpipe, but also from petrol, from brakes and from tires. And also it doesn't just apply to petrol and diesel cars, it applies to all fuel types. So it will also apply to electric cars. So they will also be hit with a charge if that happens. By the way, congestion charging is free for electric vehicles at the moment. That's being removed at the end of next year. From December the 25th, 2025, electric cars will also have to pay to drive in central London. So all of this is happening. So he could introduce you, he could do that, and then he could definitely, I mean, we already know that a lot of research and development has been done into putting into place the process and plans of how road user charging, a pay-per-mile system, could work. That's already been done. We know that money's been invested in that. We know that people have been employed to work on it. We know that job adverts have been put out for people to run it. So despite what they say, all of that is out there. That's all, you know, this is all fact-based, you know. That information is out there, you can find it, you can just Google it. So on top of that, what I said I come back to again is the fact that when you think about the fact that right now, to some extent, some people say he's the most powerful man in London. Potentially, he's the mayor of London. Some people go further and they say he's the most powerful man in the country because, you know, London is the capital city. What happens in London affects everywhere else. But in some ways you could say that, well, he's been stymied a little bit, or he's been potentially held back a little bit because of the fact that, you know, he's a Labour mayor working under a Conservative government. If he comes back in again, we will still have a Labour mayor, but more importantly, we will have a Labour government. I mean, I think even the Conservative Party are admitting that we will have a Labour government. That will happen this year. Before the end of this year, that will happen. Maybe an August election, maybe a November election. I don't think it was July. Some people said July election. I don't think so. But certainly, by the end of this year, there will be a Labour government in place. So think of the scenario. Labour government, Labour mayor. Labour mayor is already testing and developing all of these restrictive policies in central London. And the government's right there to go, right, well, they worked here. How can we take them and put them Birmingham, Manchester, and all the other cities around the world, around the UK, around the world eventually, but around the, let's stick with the UK for now, but around the UK. Angela Rayner previously already said, I think about a year ago, she said that yes, she would want to implement ULEZ in other cities as well. And then they backtrack on that. And this is why do they backtrack on this? This is interesting. And this is why I say this is so important. This election is so important because the messaging is so important. And how do we know that this messaging is important? And how do we know that it has an impact? Because we saw it. We saw it already. Because what happened, again, a few months back in the Uxbridge by-election. So there was an election in Uxbridge. And Labour was widely expected to take that win, and they lost. And they lost, it became very apparent that they lost for one reason and one reason alone, and that was that ULEZ had taken over Uxbridge, and they were very unhappy about that. So that was a message, and the message had an impact, because shortly after that message Keir Starmer made a statement that said that Sadiq Khan needs to think very carefully about ULEZ. Of course, he's now backtracked on that because he appears to have a track record of backtracking on everything. But this is what he said at the time. He said, oh no, yeah, Sadiq needs to think about that. Of course, now he's saying, oh no, ULEZ is great. But at the time he was like, oh, you know, because he didn't want to, like, at the time he realized that people are not happy about this. And at the same time, we had Rishi Sunak talking about ULEZ, because the Prime Minister was talking about ULEZ. Prime Minister then issued a manifesto for the motorists, you know. So these things happen, and he even used the term war on motorists. He actually said that in several interviews. So when all of that happened because of the Oxford by-election, because the Oxford by-election sent a message. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that, you know, this is time to send a message. It's time to send a message that you need to stop. We need to draw the line. My favorite quote from First Contact, Star Trek movie, when the Borg are on the Enterprise E and they've taken over the ship, and Picard uncharacteristically loses his temper, and he goes, the line must be drawn here, this far, no further. And I think this is what we need to do. You know, we need to tell them, this is it. Guys, you know, we're reasonable about it. We understand that, you know, the climate has to be improved, our footprints have to be reduced, our carbon footprints have to be reduced, we have to be careful of the planet, we have to be careful of people's health, we understand that. And within reason we accept that. So for example, the 20 miles per hour limits, right? I've never argued about 20 miles per hour limits if you're going to put them outside a school, outside a hospital, or on a busy high road. Makes perfect sense. You end up doing slower than those speeds anyway. When you just blanket bomb every street with 20 miles per hour limits, the driver's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. In fact, it's contrary to common sense, because what you're doing is you're slowing cars down, you're making things worse, you're increasing pollution, you're increasing the time the car is on the road. That's a whole different thing. I've done other videos about 20 miles per hour limits, but you can go check those out. But the point is that, you know, we're not unreasonable. We're accepting of these things. However, they've got to be within reason. And I think what's happening now is that they're unreasonable. And why are they unreasonable? Because it seems to be that they want people to not own and drive cars. That's what it feels like. That's what it seems like. This is why the war on motorists. And you know, there's things that have been said, there's things that have been, I can't say too much, but there's something that I heard in a conference that I was, where there were high-level speakers. I was there in a different capacity, but my ears perked up when they said something along the lines of, yes, well, it's fine, poor people won't be traveling soon anyway. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially that was the thrust of it. And I was like, whoa, what? So, you know, conspiracies aside, there are such discussions that do take place, that people do have. And this is terribly unfair, this is completely unjust. And I don't think people will accept it, but it will start here. So this is my point, right now, why this is so important, why these elections on Thursday are so important, because it starts here. This is the slippery slope. You send a green flag to this guy, and we are looking at motoring restrictions coming up rapidly and very, very strongly across the country as soon as the Labour government gets in. You send out a red flag, you tell them that no, we're not happy with this. I can't promise that you'll get a mayor that's better than the current mayor. I can't promise that anything will improve in terms of crime or housing, policing, NHS, cost of living, but what you will be doing is like, whoa, hands off, stop, think about it. You're not taking our cars off us just yet. And why I say just yet is because I don't think it will stop the war on motorists. Of course not. That's something that's encroaching. It's encroaching on a global level. It's happening everywhere. But it will send a message at least. And for a while it will slow it down, stave it off. And that's what we need. Because otherwise you can kiss your keychain goodbye. Anyway, more content on my channel and on browncarguy.com. Go check it out. Look forward to hearing your comments, and I'm sure I'll be talking about this once or twice more before the elections on Thursday. See you then. Shout out time, guys. Thank you so much. Hey, if you enjoy my content, why not get involved? Buy buy me a coffee. You can do that at either of these links. Or if you're watching on YouTube, buy me a thanks or take out a membership. It all helps. It really does. Check this out, guys. It's my book. It's my first novel, and it's written for car fans like you. It's a fun political action thriller. It's full of cool cars and spectacular action. Get your copy now at Amazon.com.